Archaeology porn.
In today's archaeology porn, we are going to feature an invaluable artifact, a key if you will, which has unlocked an untold number of ancient secrets, which has opened up an entire ancient world for our understanding, and, like the film genre we're parodying here, has become a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Delicio.
Délicieux.
Délicieux.
Der Club.
Der Club.
Bailar?
Bailar.
Bailar.
That's right, it's the Rosetta Stone. But not that Rosetta Stone. It's this one, which resides in the British Museum, repository for borrowed cultural heritage from around the globe. And it is the ultimate archaeology porn, because it has enabled us to understand ancient Egypt, the epitome of what people have in mind when they think of archaeology. So let's dive right in.
Gone to 180, 34 years of age, Jeremy Wells!
The year is 1798, and the British and the French are locked in a struggle for global dominance. You wouldn't necessarily see it from looking at this map, but Spain, Portugal, and the Netherlands, despite their vast colonial holdings, have all seriously declined. They're more or less paper tigers. The Ottoman Empire is and would remain the sick man of Europe until its collapse in World War I. And Russia, meanwhile, is preoccupied rolling over the frozen territories in the Arctic and in the Far East. The Ruskies were so desperate for warmer climes that they actually made an ill-fated attempt to colonize Hawaii, but that's for another show. So that left the world open to Britain and France, who, as they were busy building their empires, looked back to the glorious empires of antiquity, Greece, Rome, and Egypt, to provide them some street cred. And you can still see this in the architecture that remains from this time period.
Why are you telling me all this?
It's plot exposition. It has to go somewhere.
Well, because this is exactly what Napoleon was doing in Egypt, attempting to conquer a key part of all three of these vast ancient empires, and in the process hauling off a lot of their cultural treasures to fill the newly established museums in France. So Bonny brought with him a small army of 151 technical experts who became known as the Commission of Sciences and Arts that would help him identify and seize antiquities to bring back with him to the mother country. In fact, he even founded the Institut d'Egypte, or the Egyptian Institute, in 1798 to help him further this imperial project. And in the midst of all this, on July 15, 1799, at Fort Julien in Rosetta, what is now known as Cape Bay Fort, the French were busy strengthening the fortifications, expecting the British to attack any day. And in doing this, walls were taken down, and a French soldier noticed a strangely carved stone slab, which he immediately reported to his superior, General Jacques-François Minot, who in turn turned it over to the Egyptian Institute for study. There, scholars noticed three inscriptions, the top one in Egyptian hieroglyphics, the bottom in ancient Greek, and the middle in what they thought was Syriac, an ancient Mesopotamian language. However, that would later turn out to be Demotic, essentially a script form of the Egyptian language that emerged during the later dynasties to replace or complement hieroglyphics. But sure enough, the Brits did invade, although it took a couple of years, and by August 1801, they had the French surrounded in Alexandria, where General Minot was forced to surrender. The French, of course, wanted to hang on to all their looted antiquities, but the British were not having it. General Minot claimed the stone for his personal property, but after some pretty rough negotiations, he agreed to hand it over along with the other old stuff.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
The stone was brought to London in 1802, where 4 prints were made of it so that scholars could study it. And these were sent to the universities of Cambridge, Oxford, Edinburgh, and Trinity College, Dublin. The stone itself almost immediately went on display at the British Museum, which was then already about 50 years old, and it has remained there pretty much ever since. And scholars had no trouble with the Greek portion, as ancient Greek was already widely understood, and of that inscription, roughly 90% remained, except for a small portion at the lower right-hand side. Cambridge University's Richard Porson came up with a pretty good translation of the Greek by 1803, and even suggested a pretty accurate version of the missing text. So that set the stage to attempt to translate the hieroglyphics, and that was the real gold mine, along with the Demotic. French scholar Antoine Isaac Silvestre de Sacy had received a copy of his own in 1801 before the Brits stole it from the French, and he had been busy working at the translation himself. Sacy, in conjunction with Swedish scholar Johann David Åkerblad, realized that proper names, those of known people and places, could be read phonetically, and therefore you could work backward from a name you knew and sound out the Demotic characters from that alphabet. Now, they tried this method and were able to successfully translate 5 names. For example, the city of Alexandria and Ptolemy, the name of the king. Now, this was a major breakthrough. Unfortunately, thereafter, Sacy stalled in his work and he moved on to other things. However, in discussing this issue with a Chinese scholar, Sacy realized that the hieroglyphics might be sounded out in very much the same way. You see, in Chinese, the way to incorporate new and foreign names is basically to take Chinese characters that sound like those foreign words, but also which have auspicious meanings. For example, my name Jason in Chinese was translated as Jian Sun, which is basically a very masculine and phallic kind of imagery. Meanwhile, the Brits were making their own efforts at translation and not getting all that far. But in 1814, the Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society of London, Thomas Young, wrote to Sacy, who suggested to him looking for proper names in the hieroglyphics within cartouches. A cartouche is sort of an oval-shaped text bubble that the ancient Egyptians used to contain royal names, sort of like a signature or an official seal. Using this method, Young was able to identify the hieroglyphic for Ptolemy, and he found dozens of similarities between the hieroglyphics and the Demotic script. However, his progress also stalled there. Young was also in contact with another French scholar named Jean-François Champollion, who took Young's suggestion regarding the proper names and the cartouches, and he ran with it. The collegial correspondence between Young and Champollion soon turned a bit nasty, devolving into a bitter rivalry. However, if you think about it, it's pretty remarkable that 2 scholars on opposite sides of the Napoleonic Wars could work together collegially. We can't even get that today between domestic political opponents.
Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No, ain't nothing.
Oh,
girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl? I don't think.
Anyway, in his work, Young involved both the Swedish guy Åkerblad as well as Sacy, who had actually served as a mentor to the younger Champollion. But since then, Sacy had become both jealous of his former disciple's success as well as on the opposite side of the political divide. Sacy, on Young's encouragement, actually blocked the publication of some of Champollion's work, and it got pretty ugly. Champollion branched out and began to draw widely from other examples of ancient Egyptian texts, such as that found on the Philae obelisk, which was discovered in 1815 and still stands today in Dorset, England. Funny that Champollion's breakthrough came in 1822 when he was able to translate the name of Cleopatra and produce an alphabet of phonetic hieroglyphic characters, which he was able to publish on the 27th of September of that year. Young cried foul, challenging Champollion's use of his methods and setting off a new race to the finish between the two men. This effectively ended in 1824 with Champollionn's publication of his Précis du système hieroglyphique des anciens Égyptiens, in which he translated 450 ancient Egyptian words and hieroglyphic groupings. The bitterness and backbiting remained, but somehow the different players in this whole drama all managed to make amends, occasionally commending each other's work and helping each other out. But the drama didn't end there. Champollion continued his efforts to fully translate the Rosetta Stone until his premature death in 1832, at which time his notes mysteriously disappeared, and later one of Champollion's students tried to pass off the dead scholar's work as his own before that student died prematurely as well in 1838. Karma's a bitch. Other scholars continued working on a full translation of the Rosetta Stone, and a few decades later, in 1858, a group at the University of Pennsylvania in the United States did publish a full English version. So after all that, what does the Rosetta Stone say? Well, it's a bit of an anticlimax, because that's not really the important part. The important part is it opened the door to an understanding of Egyptian history, enabling the decipherment of other more important texts and a much more refined version of hieroglyphics. But here is what it says. The stone was a stele. Remember, we mentioned that word in discussing the stele of Axum, basically a freestanding stone meant to be seen and conveying a meaning. And in this case, it was commending the accession to the throne of Ptolemy V. Now, Ptolemy V reigned about 100 years before Cleopatra, but remember, this was a dynasty that was descended from the original Ptolemy, who was a general of Alexander the Great, who took control of Egypt after Alexander's death. So, this dynasty didn't really speak Egyptian, and they issued decrees in Greek. The hieroglyphics were there so that the Egyptian nobility and priestly class could understand those decrees. And by this late time in ancient Egypt, Demotic had developed as a script that could be more widely understood and transmitted. Hence the 3 scripts on one stele. Now, as to when it was actually created, the dates in the different languages don't actually correspond. However, it was in the 9th year of Ptolemy V's reign, which was in 196 or 197 BC. The decree was issued by a congress of priests who gathered at Memphis to establish a divine cult dedicated to Ptolemy V, the new-ish ruler at that point. So, like I said, not actually all that exciting.
Well, that sucks!
But how did the simple dedication of a cult require so much frickin' writing? Well, in those days, people gave themselves all sorts of fancy titles, and there was a lot of fluff in the writing. Anyway, it was really an effort by a bunch of priests to honor the king and curry favor with him, as was the common practice. But remember, the Rosetta Stone in and of itself was really not that important. It's more what it allowed us to do, to understand the writings of ancient Egypt. So when we newly discover artifacts and tombs today, like for example the tomb of this sorcerer doctor we're going to discuss later this week, understanding who they are and what they're about is a piece of cake. Now, if you want to see the Rosetta Stone for yourself, it's right in the Egyptian gallery on the ground floor of the Egyptian Museum. You can't really miss it, as it usually has quite a crowd of people around it. And, like many museums in the UK, the BM is totally free, so you have no excuse not to go there when you're next in London. But be careful to step back a little bit and not fog up the glass, because the Rosetta Stone is one of the most amazing pieces of archaeology porn. Hey, if you like what you heard, give me that thumbs up below, hit that bell to subscribe, or if you want to support more independent archaeology content, consider contributing to my Patreon, where you can enjoy some exclusive members-only benefits and other goodies. Until the next dig.